folks, Jonathan here. Thanks for being patient. I know there haven't been a lot of videos lately and we kind of went all quiet, but I'll explain that in this video and what happened yesterday. So to bring everyone up to speed, we got out of our house, we got everything packed up into the Connex box. Things were great. We jumped into the RV and we moved it down to my father's house in Palmdale, California. And then a couple of days later, or a week later, we went back up and got the the van and our sailboat, which will be the next thing that goes up to Washington with us. So we've been in Palmdale about 3 weeks, and overall we've been living in the RV, cooking, eating, sleeping in the RV for a month. So there wasn't a lot to report because this is sort of our dry run and the chance while we're in Palmdale, and my dad has a really nice shop. It was a chance for us to kind of go through and get the things that I didn't have time to fix up in Lemoore. So one of the things that's been going on, and the reason there haven't been any videos, is I've just been kind of taking it easy and fixing one thing a day and just kind of applying myself to work on that. And sometimes it goes over and takes a couple days, but nothing like, basically we're just going to do a montage where we talk about the improvements we've made while we're down here. But to keep things kind of functional and not totally stagnant, I've been moving the RV from one side of the property to the other every 7 days. Or just moving it, basically. So pack everything up. We practice putting everything away, starting it, getting everything warmed up, and moving it. Sometimes we move it 40 feet, sometimes we move it 200. But we're waiting on the paperwork to come down and just making the interior repairs. So that brings us up to why there aren't that many videos and where we're at today. Yesterday we had our first really big problem since the ceiling fell in. Not as bad as that, but it was pretty morally deflating. So not yesterday, but 7 days prior, when I moved the RV, I turned it off standing outside, and every once in a while the RV will backfire. And this time it happened. It was really loud, but I thought that was because I turned it off while I was standing outside. And usually when it backfires, I'm in the RV and it's muted, and I couldn't tell how loud it was. Well, looking around, we discovered that the backfire was much worse, and that it had actually, we found a baffle, and meaning it blew the muffler open. So when yesterday came along, I knew it was time to move, and I knew the muffler was open and it was going to be loud, but I wanted to move the RV so that we could get close to the garage, since now I was going to have to crawl underneath and replace a muffler and stuff like that. So I turned it on, I let it warm up, but a couple of things I failed at was, one, I knew the muffler was open, but I didn't inspect it to make sure that the seam had opened down. Usually when mufflers are installed, you put the seams in down, so if they open up, the fire that could be coming out goes towards the ground. These were installed kind of haphazardly, and so when it blew open, there was actually, the exhaust was blowing up. The second thing is, I knew it was backfiring, but I didn't connect the fact that that meant that fuel was getting pushed down the exhaust pipe, and so essentially we turned that broken muffler into a flamethrower. So some of you are already moaning like, oh my god, yeah, that's what happened. So I got in, and while I was idling, it wasn't really a problem, but as soon as I tried to drive it from one side to the other, it felt mushy, there wasn't a lot of power, and as I was backing up, a couple of things happened all together. Stephanie says, because she was riding in the back, I smell smoke. I looked down at the engine compartment and saw smoke or steam, and then the vehicle died. So I jumped out, and I looked under to give it kind of a cursory glance, and I saw fire. So I yelled fire and told Stephanie to get out. And so she grabbed the dogs and got out. I turned off the key because I wanted to make sure the fuel pump was off, and I ran for the hose. And then Stephanie and my dad helped me kind of put out the fire that was on the undercarriage of the RV. That was scary, but it was interesting because all of the flight deck drills and stuff that I learned about firefighting in the Navy kind of kicked in. So the first thing that I did in those like split seconds when you're making a decision was I put the water on the propane tank, which was about 1.5 feet away from where the fire was. Once I had it really wet and I knew that it had burned off any residual heat buildup, then I started actually fighting the fire, which was a little bit tricky because there's foam underneath the Holiday Rambler. I'm going to put some pictures of what it looks like underneath, but basically Holiday Rambler puts down a piece of metal and then they put the wood floor on top. But under that metal, when they're done with everything underneath the RV, they spray foam so that it's an insulative barrier. So the insulative barrier was getting so hot that it lit on fire and was dripping off. Yesterday I did a cursory inspection, and at first blush it looks like only one wire was burnt. Everything works inside the RV. We still have to check the running lights and the tail lights, but I'm going to bet you money that the wire that burned up was actually the wire that runs the fuel pump, and that's why the RV died. I'm going to check that out today. So that's what happened. The fire was probably there for maybe a minute, minute and a half. It was very, very scary, and nobody wants to go to bed thinking about the fact that their house was on fire earlier that day. But today we're gathering we're marshaling our resources, and we're going to get back under there and find out the damage and fix everything. So I have to determine why the RV was backfiring. I have to replace a muffler, and I have to figure out what that wire that was burnt up is. And if we get all that done, then I can look at replacing the foam that burnt up. That doesn't even sound very daunting to me. That it essentially is great foam that they sprayed, the great stuff that comes in a can. So replacing that foam, scraping it off and replacing that doesn't seem like a really horrible deal. But that's in addition to the other things that we still have to finish. So that's going to be a couple days of work and finding the parts and all that. So what was discouraging was Stephanie and I were getting ready to do the last big push anyway, because we wanted to be on the road around April 1st, and we only have about 10 more days left. But now we may have to push it back a few more days because of fire damage. So that's scary. But when you sleep on things and you wake up the next day, a lot of time you realize it wasn't that big of a deal. So that's why they call it an RV adventure, right? So that's where we're at. That's what we're doing, and I will put some more information and have some follow-up videos shortly. So let's get to it. Let's see what's going on.